From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
As we ran up the road towards the World Trade Center, I saw a plane sticking out of the building, and I could not believe my eyes.
I see this huge cloud floating in the sky and like papers coming out.
When Mrs. Medlin turned on the TV, I saw a picture of a plane hitting a World Trade Tower, and I just saw a big ball of fire. I was freaked out.
The first transmission said, "Control, there's a plane heading toward the side of the Pentagon."
People were standing on the sidewalk looking up into the sky, and what they were looking at was the smoke from the Pentagon.
I looked at the television and there was a movie on that I didn't want to watch. So I switched the channel, the movie was on the next channel, and I switched again, and I realized it was not a movie.
Where were you when you heard the news? What was your reaction? Why did you think it happened? How did you think the country should respond? Many of us told our stories about that day and asked others to tell us theirs. Sharing experiences with our families and communities helped us deal with the horrid events and search for comfort in others. We searched for ways to use our skills to help in some way. So on the afternoon of September 12, 2001, hundreds of folklorists, anthropologists, oral historians, and other ethnographers around the country received an email from the American Folklife Center asking them to use their skills in cultural documentation to take out their tape recorders and record stories and reactions of members of their community. The response was overwhelming. Almost immediately, we began receiving emails from several individuals saying they would like to contribute. We had no plan and no resources to provide to contributors. All the interviews were done with their own time, their own equipment, and their own question format. In the immediate sense, this exercise served as a therapeutic way to express ourselves through the sharing of our experiences and thoughts with one another. These interviews also served a documentary function because they have been preserved in the Library of Congress so that future generations who have not lived through these events will be able to learn about us directly from our own voices. The inspiration for this project had its origins in a similar project begun on December 8, 1941, the day after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Alan Lomax, who was in charge of the Archive of American Folksong, sent telegrams to folklorists asking them to collect man-on-the-street reactions to the bombing and to the declaration of war by the United States. The people who were interviewed expressed their immediate reactions to and opinions of what war meant for the United States. Recordings were made in many places across the country, from New York City to Washington, D.C., from Madison to Nashville, from Dallas to Denver. The people included shoemakers, cab drivers, salesmen, housewives, students, and soldiers. People of many ethnic groups and ages expressed their opinions on the political, social, economic, and military aspects of the war. The intent of this project is best described in a letter written to Lomax from Fletcher Collins, a field worker who had received one of Lomax's telegrams. On December 11, 1941, Collins wrote, "This project contributes vitally to civilian morale in expressing what the common people of the nation are feeling and thinking, an expression of others than governmental leaders, radio commentators, and newsmen." The result is a fascinating portrait of everyday life in America at the end of 1941. Back then, approximately 200 interviews were recorded on aluminum and glass-based discs using Presto disc cutting machines. In 2001, interviews were captured on cassette tapes and CDs using much smaller portable machines. The Folklife Center received approximately 600 interviews from 22 states and a U.S. military base in Naples, Italy. The original call was to folklore professionals trained in ethnographic documentation, but the word quickly spread to others, and we received interviews from high school teachers, film students, librarians, and local historical societies. As a result of the broad participation, we received recordings made with professional equipment and others made with $20 tape recorders. Some people who had video cameras used them to record their interviews. Regardless of the format the participants chose and whatever the sound quality, each recording adds a valuable piece to the full story of September 11th. The diversity of the collection is just as we had hoped. We have interviews from people who were in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon during the attacks, but also from people living in East Sullivan, Maine, Des Moines, Iowa, Los Angeles, California, and many other towns and cities, small and large, across the country. We received interviews with teachers and students from elementary to graduate school, police officers, firefighters, and other emergency workers, secretaries, executives, librarians, and mayors, citizens whose families have lived in the United States for generations and those who had arrived only days before. The following is a small sampling of some of the narratives representative of this collection. The first excerpt is from Don Brennan, a police officer from the Pentagon who responded to the call on his police radio when the plane first hit. He's being interviewed by his daughter, a student at Utah State University.
On September 11th, I was working at one of the entrances. I had gone on break and I was in the main cafeteria when I heard two radio transmissions. The first transmission said, "Control, there's a plane heading toward the side of the Pentagon." And another radio call came in. Another police officer, he's very excited. He says, "Oh my God, Control, a plane just crashed at the side of the building." My first reaction is, I don't believe a plane has crashed at the side of the building. It was just complete chaos. People were running and screaming and pointing in a direction. So I had to run toward the crowd of people. They were all coming toward me. I was the only one going the other way because they were trying to get away from the way the plane had hit. I stood there and looked around, and the screaming and the sprinkler system and everything just going off, and I just stood there for a second and finally realized the enormity. I says, what the heck do I do? There's all these people asking for help. They're saying, go down that hallway, they need you down there. And I'm saying, like, where do I go? And it was really like, at that time, the first time in my, I think, police career, I really didn't know what to do. Then it hit me, Don, you are trained to save lives.
We have approximately 200 interviews from New York City and Arlington, Virginia, but the majority of this collection is from other parts of the country, from those who heard about the news from their television, from a phone call, or from teachers in their classrooms. The next excerpt is from a videotaped interview from Caribou, Maine, conducted at a local grocery store by film students at the Caribou Technology Center.
At first I thought, oh, this is as bad as Pearl Harbor, but as the story unfolds, I think it's far worse, because for starters, I think we're going to have more casualties, and secondly, we don't really know who our enemy is in this case, and it makes it awfully difficult to retaliate. We need to find out who actually did this, because the rest of the world won't appreciate it if we just start bombing some country on the off chance that the perpetrator lives there and a whole bunch of innocent people get killed. So I think for starters we need to find out who did it, and then I think once we find out, there should be no holes barred in terms of retaliation. It should be swift, it should be complete, and it should be something that the enemy never forgets.
The content of the interviews goes beyond feelings experienced on the day of September 11th. They include views on international relations, politics, economics, patriotism, charity efforts, fears of flying, prejudices, and how lives were changed by the events in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and New York. Though collecting audio recordings was the primary goal of this project, some people documented their community's reactions in photographs. Therefore, this collection also includes photographic documentation of the spontaneous memorial tributes from various parts of the country. These memorials, signboards, and decorations all add to the public discourse of the events. The candles and flowers, written messages and drawings from children, flags and other items collectively represent the grief and solidarity of individuals and businesses. A few of our staff members took photographs of memorials at Arlington Cemetery and the Pentagon. We also received images of memorials from places such as Marietta, Georgia, Knoxville, Tennessee, and Las Vegas, Nevada. These visual reactions and sound recordings from communities across the United States contribute to the story of how this nation, on the local level, experienced and reacted to the events of September 11th. This collection is not only being preserved in the library, it is also being made available to the public. One purpose of having this collection here is to have it available to all who visit the Library of Congress and wish to learn more about people's reactions to September 11th, 2001. At the same time, one can listen to the voices from 1941 and hear how people responded then. There have been many comparisons made between Pearl Harbor and September 11th. As these two collections illustrate, there are striking similarities and differences. Here are two collections side by side, available to generations of researchers to listen, study, and learn from. As it was with Pearl Harbor, the media news footage of September 11th will be preserved. We'll always be able to know how the events unfolded. By contrast, this collection tells us more about who we are, how we live, how our daily lives and attitudes have been changed, where we were at the end of the year 2001.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.